Hello, I'm Terry McAllister with the National Institute of Standards and Technology, and I'd like to talk to you today about the Nist Community Resilience Planning Guide. Community resilience has a special role within the wider topic of resilience. As many of us know, resilience is the ability to prepare for and adapt to changing conditions and to withstand and recover rapidly from disruptions. This can be applied at many scales. At Nist, we've decided to focus at the community level, and especially noting that resilience goes beyond mitigating risk and really focuses on ensuring that the community recovers its functions in a specified time frame. Community resilience provides context for the built environment. So if you look at the graphic on the left, we have our social functions that many communities provide, and on the right is the infrastructure systems that help support those social functions. And a key aspect of community resilience is that these social functions provide context for the performance goals and functional requirements of buildings and physical infrastructure. So as we've been working on community resilience, we've identified some significant measurement challenges. The focus areas that in particular you'll be hearing more about today are metrics, data, models, and decision support. Developing metrics at the community scale has proved to be very challenging but important, and they rely upon data, which if you start looking at data for physical, social, and economic systems and communities, you rapidly realize that they have greatly varying spatial and temporal scales. And in particular, there is very little, if any, data about community recovery. And this is essential for resilience models that are integrating these systems. And all of this, of course, leads to decision support, helping communities make better decisions, particularly with an understanding of the uncertainty that's inherent in this type of modeling. So the Nist Community Resilience Program focuses in 3 areas to address these challenges. We have science-based tools, community engagement, and disaster and failure studies. Our science-based tools focus on indicators and metrics, the economics at the community and small business scale, and doing systems, methods, and models to do pre- and post-event performance assessment and help communities identify alternative resilience actions. And of course, we also work on design and assessment methods for codes and practice. The Nist community resilience tools that we've developed to date are listed here. In particular, we'll be focusing on the planning guidance today, the community resilience planning guides that were released in 2015, and the playbook, which was released more recently in 2021. And we see here we also have tools for economics, system models, and assessment methodologies. These are all available through our website. So let me just provide a little bit of background, going back a little bit. At Nist, we first started thinking about resilience around 2011. This was after a number of hurricane disasters, the World Trade Center, and more we were starting to see these very large-scale impacts, whereas prior to that, the impacts had tended to be more focused on buildings. So we started working on a workshop in 2011, and that led to thinking that we wanted to develop community guidance. And in 2015, we had a very large year. We issued the Community Resilience Planning Guide. We formed a Community Resilience Program at Nist, and we awarded a 5-year cooperative grant to a Center of Excellence to address community resilience, which I'll be talking more about. And that Center of Excellence, which is led by John Vandelent and Jamie Cruz, has done such an excellent job that it was renewed in 2020 for 5 more years. One thing that I think is important to emphasize is that resilience integrates many disaster concepts and tools that had developed prior to this point, and it looks to minimize the impacts of disruptive events. And a big aspect of resilience is how these integrations can improve the overall performance from pre-event to post-event. So we started with our guide development process in 2014 with workshops. We wanted to make sure that this guide would be useful to large and small communities. We had extensive public and private sector input with 4 national workshops that are listed here. And that informed the final version that was released in 2015. We also had the pleasure and benefit of working with these community resilience fellows. Because we were a new program, we did not have expertise in all areas of infrastructure or social or economic aspects. And so we brought in these individuals to help us have a rapid ramp up to have expertise in all the areas that the guide addresses. And they also helped us working with communities and stakeholders as we moved forward. We also initiated a community resilience panel from 2015 to 2017. And the goal of the panel was to break down these silos and barriers that we had between the different groups that were all working in communities. So with these goals in mind, engage and connect community and cross-sector stakeholders, we were looking to identify policy, standards, gaps, and barriers, raise awareness across the many stakeholders that play a role in resilience, and contribute to other community resilience documents. And while this was very successful, at 2017, we realized that we needed to move on to holding more focused workshops as we advanced our science and research. So I'm going to focus now on the Nist guide for planning and the 6-step process that is the basic heart of the methodology here. And this is the heart of both the guide and the subsequent playbook. Which is more focused on action-oriented items as communities are going through their planning process. The guide tends to be a more comprehensive resource for understanding a lot of the thinking and available codes and standards and other related aspects. So out of these 6 steps here, the first 3, form a collaborative planning team, understand the situation for your social and physical systems in your community, and determining goals and objectives for resilience planning. These were the 3 that we found that were critical to having an informed plan and were least likely to be done in many communities. Many of them felt they were continuing a planning process, and there was a strong tendency to jump right into plan development. So the real value in this process has been to help communities reevaluate what they're doing and to supplement maybe some of the gaps they had in their planning process. So just to step through these briefly, the collaborative planning team, many communities only had a few people at the table when they were developing their plans, and they did not have a comprehensive method set in place to work with and inform the public and private stakeholders affected by resilience planning. And you can see our scale here goes from individuals and families up to the national level. Depending on the community, you would bring in the stakeholders at the various levels and make sure that they were talking with each other and understood what was going to be happening. Now, when we say understand the situation, we want to talk about how you link social aspects, healthcare, education, governance, with the physical systems and how one is so directly dependent upon the other. So if we start here under sequential damage from the community scale and you have your physical systems, when those are no longer operating as they should, either partially or entirely, has a very strong impact on all those social systems across the community. And this can lead to very negative consequences on society. Depending on the degree, they can last for weeks up to years. And you see here some examples of how these may affect individuals, businesses, and the community. And I think one of the major concerns we hear over and over again from communities is the loss of population. When they don't have schools open, when their children cannot go to school or daycare, this has a substantial impact on all communities. So in understanding what you have in your community, the next step then is to determine what kind of performance the community wants from its infrastructure and social institutions. And we do this in two steps. We have the wish list, your desired performance, as well as your anticipated, your expectations of performance for what you have in your community today. And in terms of desired performance, you really don't have to specify a hazard. And this is a hard concept for some folks to pick up on, because what you want to know is, when do I need my hospital open? When do we need our schools open? When do we need to have our businesses open? These questions are usually more about the finance, the economics, and the support of your families in your community than they are about the hazards. And then we go to, what do we expect for our communities today? And now we start to see, what is the difference between our recovery level that we think we're going to have given our current environment versus what the community would like to have. And this is where we start to really have an informed planning process. So this little chart on the right is just giving two examples highlighted here for all buildings at the community scale and the wastewater system at the community scale, because they have the largest gap. The green box here is what the community would like for the performance to be, recovery within 0 days, basically no loss of function, to 1 to 4 weeks, versus the expected performance of 4 to 24 months for the full recovery of those systems. So this helps prioritize among the many demands that communities have, how they might want to address these prioritized gaps. And this can be both through what we call administrative solutions or construction solutions. And finally, last but certainly not least, you need community buy-in. And so this is why the collaborative planning team and the communication is so important, because when you go to raise your taxes or other funds to support these plans, the community needs to be behind you. So here we have plan approval and plan maintenance, where communities, as they all do now, have continuing cycles of plan development and updating. So we've had our Nist guide out for about 6 years now, and these are just some examples of how it's being used. We have professional organizations, we have universities, we have federal agencies and state agencies that are all using the guide to help inform their planning processes, anywhere from the state down to the community level. I want to talk for a minute now about the Center for Risk-Based Community Resilience Planning, which Nist funded starting in 2015. It's led by Colorado State University with up to 14 institutions. And Nist and center researchers collaborate to develop the science basis for systems modeling and analysis and decision support tools for communities. So there's 3 basic research thrusts: developing the interdependent networked community resilience modeling environment, or NCORE, improving data ontology, architecture, and management tools for the multidisciplinary data that we discussed, social, economic, and physical data, and also field studies and method validation. So NCORE has been under development and was first released in 2019. and it's continuing its development. You can access it now at the website listed below. And we have reports on a longitudinal field study that we're conducting for Lumberton, North Carolina, where the center and Nist have gone back. We're, I guess, just in the 4th year of documenting the recovery of Lumberton, North Carolina. So I'd like to talk about also how the Nist guidance is used within CORE. And you see the planning steps on the right are color-coded. So the Nist guide and playbook are being used to help develop a user interface. The guide provides a community planning process, and INCORE provides the analysis behind the planning steps. And when we first developed the guide, this was lacking. There were no tools to do a lot of the analyses that communities needed to follow the planning process. So it was being done through expert judgment. INCORE users can develop resilience plans now and evaluate alternative mitigation strategies or policies to improve their resilience and understand what their recovery might look like. So using the color coding on the right, we are just showing you a basic flow chart that INCORE uses. And if you start with form a collaborative planning team, that's step 1, and then you characterize the community in step 2, where we have the built environment, social systems, and economic systems. And then we move to determining goals and objectives, step 3, which also include selecting a hazard, simulating the damage to determine the anticipated performance, and comparing that against the desired performance. And there is an optimization loop. It is still under development, but is expected to be released in the next year to allow iterations and better understand alternative options for the communities to consider. And all of this then is used to help communities develop their resilience plans. And here are just some simple screenshots so you can see the user interface. So the form a collaborative planning team can be documented, so everything is now in one place. There's ways to characterize your hazard, and then there's plots, both graphical as well as tabular, that look at how you analyze damage and social impacts, and have your summary tables. So I would just like to close with noting that a key step for both community and infrastructure design and resilience is this concept of enabling functional recovery, or recovery of functions in a specified time frame. This is an area that the Center and Nist are working on through this multidisciplinary modeling and our longitudinal field studies. And Nist and FEMA released a report this year that also focuses on recommended options for improving the built environment, reoccupancy, and functional recovery time. It focuses on earthquakes, but a lot of these concepts would apply to other hazards as well. And when we talk about functional recovery, the goals are basically stated that we need tools for planning and design that includes time to recovery of function. It doesn't exist in the engineering world right now. There may be levels of recovery that vary between systems and their role in the community. Data and validated models for recovery are needed to inform design practice, and guidance is needed for both new and existing infrastructure. So thank you very much for your attention.